everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you guys my Hunger Games rereading vlog. I'm so excited to reread these books for the first time. I did want to take a minute to say that I'm going to be putting a ton of links down below for links to organizations that you can donate to, petitions that you can sign, also Black-owned bookstores that you can support during this time to support the Black Lives Matter movement. I talked about this a lot more in my end of May wrap-up. We all need to be doing as much as we can to support this very important movement, and I am ashamed that it has taken me this long to come onto my channel and to come onto my platforms to talk about this. But yeah, definitely check out those links. Also, I am linking my Twitter and my Goodreads as usual. My Twitter, I have been retweeting some incredible tweets, also retweeting just resources and information that may not be linked down below. So definitely check that out. And in terms of my Goodreads, I'm pretty sure if you follow me on there or if you're a friend of mine that you can see my want to read shelf. I have been adding a lot of books. I think I've added about 100 books at this point, and I'm adding more every day of both fiction and nonfiction books that are either by Black authors or about Black main characters. I'm really terrible at reading nonfiction books, so this is really important for me because I'm trying to educate myself and I'm trying to become a true ally and a true activist. So I totally recommend checking out that shelf as well, because I got those recommendations straight from either Black booktubers or bookstagrammers or just different resources online. Okay, so with all that being said, I have read a good part of The Hunger Games, which of course is the first book in the series. I also wanted to say that there will be spoilers in this video just because these books have been out for years, the movies have been out for years. I am assuming that all of you have at least watched the movie, so definitely be aware of that. So right now I am on page 148, that is chapter 11, and right where I left off, they were literally just about to start the games. So I don't have a ton of thoughts, except I will say that I just adore how fast-paced this book is, but at the same time, it's not too rushed. I did want to take a moment and just read this quote real quick because I think that it relates a lot to the Black Lives Matter movement. Gale and Katniss are just having a discussion after Katniss volunteered as tribute. So Gale says, "You know how to kill, not people, I say. How different can it be really?" says Gale grimly. "The awful thing is that if I can forget their people, it will be no different at all." And I think that ties in to everything that's going on in our country right now. I think there's a lot of dehumanization that is going on, that has been going on for hundreds of years, and I think that's all I'm gonna say about that. I think it's just a very, very powerful quote that I wanted to share. Also, I wanted to discuss Katniss and Peeta's characters for a little bit, just because I'm already seeing slight differences between how they are portrayed in the book versus the movie. I feel like in the movie, Jennifer Lawrence plays Katniss a bit more stoically, whereas what I love about the book is that since it's all in Katniss's POV, we constantly know what she's thinking. We understand why she says and does the things that she does, even though some of her actions may not be the best or ideal in the situation that she's being put in. I just love being in her mindset, and unfortunately we do miss that inner monologue, of course, in the movie. And then as far as Peeta's character goes, I have a specific incident that like kind of shocked me considering what I remember Peeta's character to be. I feel like in the book he definitely has like more of a backbone in a lot of ways. So they're basically meeting Haymitch for the first time in the train, and Katniss says, "So you're supposed to give us advice. Here's some advice. Stay alive," says Haymitch, and then bursts out laughing. "I exchange a look with Peeta before I remember I'm having nothing more to do with him. I'm surprised to see the hardness in his eyes. He generally seems so mild." "That's very funny," says Peeta. Suddenly he lashes out at the glass in Haymitch's hand. It shatters on the floor, sending the blood-red liquid running toward the back of the train, only not to us. I literally put goop. Like, I would never expect Peeta to like be that outright, like be that aggressive to Haymitch, but like you can just see how from like day one how seriously he's taking all this. Of course, like Katniss is too, but like I mean, I think from day one we know that Peeta is trying his best to survive here. The fact that Haymitch is making a joke out of it, like, yikes. So I love that like Peeta automatically just like puts him in his place. I just think that's an amazing moment. So with that being said, I think that's gonna be it for now, because like I said, I'm not even halfway through this book, but I will say because this is so fast paced, I'm also listening to the audiobook while reading it physically at the same time. I'm definitely gonna finish this today, and I might even get started on Catching Fire tonight. It just depends on how much reading I get done, but I am just so pumped to keep reading. I just forgot how amazing Suzanne Collins' writing style is. I'll definitely talk to you guys after I finish this first book. All right, so it is definitely well past time to give you guys an update. It is Tuesday afternoon right now. I finished The Hunger Games pretty late last night, but I didn't get a chance to start on Catching Fire just yet because I really needed to edit my end of May reading wrap up. So if you're interested in watching that video, I'll link it up in the cards above. That video took me quite a while to edit. Wrap ups usually take me a long time to edit, but I did have a few discussing points with this first book, and then I'll kind of move on to some thoughts that I have about Catching Fire. So I find it interesting the way that Rue's character was portrayed in the movie versus the books. Like, I feel like her character is much more active and smarter and more clever in the book, whereas in the movie she's like very silent. You know, I feel like Katniss talks to her and like she doesn't really say anything back, whereas in this book they actually have quite a few really meaningful conversations, and Rue gives Katniss a really clear picture of what life really is like in District 11. And yeah, I don't know, I just like her character so much more in the book than in the movie, and I wish they would have made her character, I guess, more active in the movie. And then in terms of Rue's death, which always devastates me every time I read the book or watch the movie, of course. I did want to talk about the fact that I forgot that District 11, I guess some members of that community pulled together and bought Katniss some bread from the district as a way of saying thank you for, you know, helping her out in the games, as well as like giving her like a meaningful kind of like burial, you know, farewell. You know, she covers Rue's body in, I think, white flowers or wildflowers, and Katniss mentions that that is rebellious, and I'm not really sure why. Like, I don't think Katniss like really says why exactly that wouldn't be a great thing to do, or why the Capitol would view that as a bad thing or as a rebellious thing. So if you guys have any insights about that, I would love to hear it, because I really don't know. Another topic that I wanted to bring up that I'm confused about is that girl Foxface. I think she's from District 5, I think, and she ends up being killed when Peeta collects some berries for him and Katniss to eat, but Katniss realizes that they're poisonous berries, and so she, like, I think she flings them out of his hands or something. And while they're kind of arguing about them, Foxface ends up eating them and dying from it. And some people, I remember Peyton from Peyton Reads, I'll link her channel up in the cards as well. She is like a Hunger Games super fan. I love her Hunger Games content, especially when the prequel was coming out. She put out some really great videos for that release. She discussed the fact that a lot of people think that Foxface actually committed suicide, and I was trying to look for that in the book, and I just don't see how it was really suicide, because as far as I can tell from the book, she ate the berries before Katniss could express to Peeta that they were poisonous. So as far as I know, she didn't know that they were poisonous. Also, I want to talk about Thresh, who is the boy from District 11, and I'm conflicted about his character, because he never tried to help Rue at all during these games. As soon as the game started, he just like went and ran into like that field that's on the opposite side of the arena that like nobody else dared to go to, and he just like stayed there until he had to be flushed out. And then there's that whole scene where Katniss is about to be murdered, I think by Clove, and then Thresh shows up and kills her, and then he confronts Katniss and he's like, wait, you actually helped Rue? And so Katniss explains to Thresh like what actually happened with Rue's death, and like you can see that Thresh is really emotional and really crushed about it, but like if you really felt for this girl, why didn't you ever try to help her? Like, why did you just let her go off on her own? I just don't understand like why he wouldn't have formed an alliance with her, because we see that Rue does have her own strengths and her own abilities, and she's very clever. So like, I don't understand why Thresh wouldn't know that and why he wouldn't want her on his team. I think that's all the discussion points I wanted to bring up with this book. I of course gave it 5 stars. I think what has really stuck out to me with this reread is how amazingly paced this book was. And I'm not very far into Catching Fire, but Catching Fire is the exact same way. I just feel like Suzanne Collins could definitely put on a masterclass about how to pace a novel. So going on to Catching Fire, I have read up to page 106, and something that I've been making a point to do, especially in Catching Fire, this comes up because President Snow's character is actually really introduced in this book. Like, yes, we see him, I feel like, for a millisecond, like towards, I think maybe at the end of this book. But it's really in this book that we get a lot more of his character, obviously, because there's that scene at the very beginning where he shows up at Katniss's house and he's like, yo, I got your number. Like, you need to not only convince the country, you need to convince me that you really love PETA, or there's going to be hell to pay, right? And so I've been making a point to underline any hints about him that I think are going to come to play in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which of course is the prequel that follows his character. She talks about a lot how he's got snake-like eyes and like how his lips are weird and like he smells like blood and roses mixed together, which is a very weird combination, and I'm very interested to see like how that keeps coming into play, not only later in this series but in the prequel as well, because I can't remember like why exactly he smells like blood, unless he's maybe dying, like he's got an illness or something. But yeah, so I found that interesting. Also, we're seeing that Gale is just like so pissed at Katniss after she's come back from the games, and then she got engaged to PETA, you know, to hold up this whole charade that they are star-crossed lovers. And I'm just like, Gale, why are you mad, girl? Why are you mad? Like, y'all never made promises to each other before Katniss left for the games in the first book. Like, you have no claim on her. And I feel like this reread is also just showing me how like kind of yikes of a character Gale is. I'm trying to see the good in him, you know, because he does try to help out Katniss's family, you know, especially when she was away during the games and stuff like that. Like, I don't know, there's good aspects about his character, but at the same time I'm just like, boy, you need to calm down. So I think that's going to be it for this clip. I think I'm just gonna go ahead and probably finish the rest of this book, and yeah, I'll probably just talk to you guys at some point tomorrow. All right guys, it's Wednesday afternoon. I finished Catching Fire last night, and I was actually able to also get started on Mockingjay, and at this point in the day I am about halfway through Mockingjay. But first, I did want to bring up a couple of talking points with Catching Fire. Something that I did not realize upon reread is that the games themselves don't even start until, let me see, page like 267, which is just absolutely nuts to me. So it's only like this last chunk of the book that is the games. I definitely see why Suzanne Collins did that, because she needed to develop the rebellions in all of these different districts, and she also needed to develop what has happened since the first book. So when this book opens, it's been like several months, I think, since the 74th Hunger Games, and now Katniss and PETA are getting ready to go on their victory tour, which is when they just go to all the districts and, I don't know, essentially kind of rub it in everyone's faces that they won. Like, it's just a very icky situation. So there's all of that, and then we don't even get the announcement that the Quarter Quell is going to involve past tributes until I think like halfway through the book. Something else that I really appreciated upon reread is that we actually do get to see the games that Haymitch won. So Haymitch won the 50th annual Hunger Games, which was the second Quarter Quell, and the special twist that year was that they had twice as many tributes. So they had 48 tributes as opposed to 24, and Haymitch won those games essentially by using the force field. Essentially it goes down to him and another tribute, and they are like fighting to the death. They both are like mortally wounded, and the fight like gets all the way to the edge of the map where the force field is. And so since Haymitch knows how the force field works, he uses it to his advantage, so that win the tribute. I think she like ends up throwing an axe or something at him and he ducks, and the axe goes into the force field. And the way that the force field worked was that if something touched it, it would like immediately bounce back or something like that. Anyway, it like repelled off of the force field and ended up killing that tribute, which made Haymitch the winner. And I just really love seeing that insight into his character. I kind of wish that we would have been able to get that in the movie, but I totally understand that it probably would have made the movie a little too long. Also, just a little tidbit that I wanted to add is that for the 25th annual Hunger Games, the twist that was put on it for the first quarter quell was that they actually had to hold elections in each district to elect the tributes that would go into the arena, which I don't know what's more messed up, electing people to go in or it being just picked randomly from the pool. Upon reread, I definitely still think this is my favorite of the series because I love the direction that the story is going in, and I just really love the supporting characters that we get introduced to in this book with the other tributes that we have going on. Of course, I adore Finnick. I really like Joanna. Beatty is really cool. There's, yeah, just some really awesome characters that we get introduced to in the second book. And like I said, I also like that we actually get some development with President Snow's character and his relationship with Katniss and how he views Katniss. So yeah, then in terms of Mockingjay, I am, let's see, on page 192, and that is pretty much exactly the halfway mark. Something that I'm loving about this book so far is that we get a picture pretty early on that Coin, who is, I guess, the president of District 13, her regime is not any better really than President Snow's, and in some aspects her regime might even be a little bit worse. Page 59, Katniss is thinking, another force to contend with, another power player who has decided to use me as a piece in her games, although things never seem to go according to plan. And then later on in that page it says, and now Coin, with her fistful of precious nukes and her well-oiled machine of a district, finding it's even harder to groom a Mockingjay than to catch one. She's referring to herself. And she also says she has been the first to publicly brand me as a threat, because in the chapter right before this, President Coin did a public announcement where she was like, okay, we're gonna pardon all of the tributes that were left at the Capitol. You know, once we kind of rescue them, we will pardon them for their crimes. But she does make it a point to say if Katniss steps out of line, they are all dead. And so that is the catalyst for which Katniss thinks, okay, I don't think Coin is any better than Snow. I think this is what starts her whole thought process of, well, what are we gonna do now? Because if we get rid of Snow, we still have Coin to deal with, and she wants to be the one to take over the country. So I just love that Suzanne Collins makes a point to start developing that plot point very early on in the book. And also, like I said in an earlier update, you know, I'm trying to keep track of hints about President Snow that will definitely be used in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And so on page 171, this is the part where Finnick spills all of the capital T that he has collected over the years, because President Snow would sell him to the highest bidder, you know, and so people would use Finnick's body, and in exchange of that, Finnick would coax secrets out of these people that he was used by. So on page 171, he says, and now on to our good president, Coriolanus Snow. I don't know why that is such a difficult word for me, difficult name to say. It says, such a good young man when he rose to power, such a clever one to keep it. How, you must ask yourself, did he do it? One word, that's all you really need to know, poison. And so he goes on to talking about how he would kind of stealthily take out people by poisoning them, but President Snow would also drink from the poison cup to deflect suspicion. And it says, but antidotes don't always work. They say that's why he wears the roses that reek of perfume. They say it's to cover the scent of blood from the mouth sores that will never heal. So that ties into what I talked about earlier in the vlog, like why does he smell like blood and roses? So we do get that answer. And then it also just says poison, the perfect weapon for a snake. And later on that same page, we get the full picture as to why Haymitch is the way that he is. So Katniss asks him if the Capitol also sold his body, you know, to the highest bidder. And Haymitch says, no, my mother and younger brother, my girl, they were all dead 2 weeks after I was crowned victor. Because of that stunt I pulled with the force field, Snow had no one else to use against me. So that, of course, is really devastating because, you know, throughout this series, Katniss does make comments like, why do we not see Haymitch's family? He's always by himself, you know, obviously he's always drunk, and now we get the full picture as to why that is the case. I think that's all of the main discussion points I wanted to bring up for now. I am going to finish this book definitely by the end of tonight, and I'll probably wait till tomorrow to kind of do like my final discussion and all of that, just because I feel like there's gonna be a lot of things that I'm going to want to discuss in terms of this trilogy overall. All right guys, so I finished Mockingjay last night, and it is now the next day. Today's what, Thursday? I think, and I still have quite a few discussion points. The first one, I'm on page 223 in my copy, and Katniss is discussing with Plutarch, I don't know, essentially the differences between the Capitol and District 13, and how during the dark days, you know, District 3 was essentially cut off from the rest of Panem, right? And now at this point in the revolution, the Capitol is the one that is cut off from everybody else. And so Plutarch says, but the significant difference between 13 and the Capitol are the expectations of the populace. 13 was used to hardship, whereas in the Capitol, all they've known is panem et circenses. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that word. It is in Latin, and I kind of have an idea, but I'm not sure if that's correct. I'll put the word here. And so he goes on to say, it's a saying from thousands of years ago, written in a language called Latin about a place called Rome, he explains. Panem et circenses translates into bread and circuses. The writer was saying that in return for full bellies and entertainment, his people had given up their political responsibilities and therefore their power. So now comes the realization that the name of the country, Panem, translates to bread. And I'm just like, what? Why would you name your country bread? I guess it's essentially, you know, it is a reference to this saying that, you know, the bread is the full bellies, I guess, of this explanation. But like, I just think that's such a weird way to name your country, and just a weird thing to call your country. And then on 228, I just love this little scene that we get, because we're getting our first real sign that Peeta is actually healing and recovering from being hijacked. You know, the Capitol took him at the end of Catching Fire, and so they got him back for District 13 about halfway through the book. And so they've just been trying to find ways to help him heal. And so Annie and Finnick have their wedding, which is like the sweetest thing ever. I kind of wish that we would have gotten actually more from Finnick and Annie themselves. We're just getting that scene from Katniss's POV. But we learn that Peeta actually decorated their wedding cake. You know, he's finding his way back to himself and back to his baking, and I think it's just the sweetest thing ever. And they have a realization that the cake decorating is like a kind of therapy for him, and I just love that. Then I'm all the way on page 328 right now, and there's this weird conversation between Peeta and Gale about who's gonna end up with Katniss and all of that. I just find this exchange so odd, because yes, Peeta has made a ton of progress in terms of healing from the hijacking, and, you know, he's no longer seeing Katniss as the enemy, but I still don't really think he's in a place of mind to think of Katniss as a love interest. I don't know. I'm a little conflicted about this. Peeta says, she loves you, you know. She's as good as told me after they whipped you. Don't believe it, Gale answers. The way she kissed you in the quarter quell, well, she never kissed me like that. It was just part of the show, Peeta tells him, although there's an edge of doubt in his voice. No, you won her over, gave up everything for her. Maybe that's the only way to convince her you love her. Yeah, Peeta says, I wonder how she'll make up her mind. Oh, that I do know. I can just catch Gale's last words through the layer of fur. Katniss will pick whoever she thinks she can't survive without. So on the next page, she says, a chill runs through me. Am I really that cold and calculating? Gale didn't say Katniss will pick whoever it will break her heart to give up, or even whoever she can't live without. Those would have implied I was motivated by a kind of passion. But my best friend predicts I will choose the person who I think I can't survive without. There's not the least indication that love or desire or even compatibility will sway me. And then I underlined this quote. It's a horrible thing for Gale to say, for Peeta not to refute, especially when every emotion I have has been taken and exploited by the Capitol or the rebels. I do think it's a bit unfair of Gale to say that the only way to convince her you love her is to give up everything for her. I think that's unfair to say. And I don't know what to think about Katniss will pick whoever she thinks she can't survive without. I don't know, because I think that Katniss could just ditch both of them as love interests and just be friends with them for the rest of her life and not pick either one of them. She doesn't need anyone to survive. She can totally survive on her own. And I'm gonna actually get into that a little bit later in the video because I do want to discuss in detail my feelings about is Katniss asexual or not. And then on page 367, you know, this is after the Capitol was bombed and Prim got murdered, essentially because of the bombs that Gale and Beetee designed. So Katniss asks him, was it your bomb? And he says, I don't know, neither does Beetee, he says. Does it matter? You'll always be thinking about it. I will never be able to separate that moment from Gale. My silence is my answer. That was the only thing I had going for me, taking care of your family, he says. And I was like, you said it, girl. That was literally the only thing that Gale really had going for his character, in my opinion, was that he took care of her family when she was away at the games. And of course, he helped take care of her family when Katniss was at home. You know, they would hunt together and things like that. Then I'm on page like 369, 370. This is the part where Coin introduces the idea to the surviving victors of a Hunger Games where it would just be Capitol children competing. And so this is when Katniss realizes, let's see, there's a direct quote. She says, nothing has changed, nothing will ever change now. You know, and I find it so weird that Coin wants to have yet another Hunger Games, because don't you want the country to change at all? Or were you simply just staging a coup so that you could be president of the exact same country? Did you really not want to change anything? I don't think she was ever fully intending on completely getting rid of the Hunger Games ever. So if you want to discuss that with me in the comments, definitely do that, because I find that very interesting. Also, the moment when she kills President Coin, like, oh my god, like I literally put iconic. Like that is one of the most iconic moments in this entire series. Like honestly, what a plot twist. And then I love this whole paragraph on page 388. This is literally the page right before the epilogue, so this is like the end of the book. And she says, Peeta and I grow back together. She talks about like how there's still moments where he's having flashbacks, but his arms are there to comfort me when she has nightmares, and eventually his lips. On the night I feel that thing again, the hunger that overtook me on the beach, I know this would have happened anyway. That what I need to survive is not Gale's fire, kindled with rage and hatred. I have plenty of fire myself. What I need is the dandelion in the spring, the bright yellow that means rebirth instead of destruction. And later on in the page, he says, you love me, real or not real? I tell him real. And I literally put like a little heart next to that. I love this whole paragraph. And something that also clicked in my mind, Gale kind of represents war and Peeta represents peace. And so Katniss realized that she wanted to live out the rest of her life in peace as opposed to war. One more thing I wanted to point out is that like in the epilogue, she refers to her children as the boy and the girl. She doesn't name them, like she doesn't talk about them by name. The arenas have been completely destroyed, the memorials built, there are no more Hunger Games, but they teach about them at school and the girl knows we played a role in them. The boy will know in a few years. I don't know, I just think that's such a weird choice. Why wouldn't you refer to your children by the names that you gave them? Okay, so now I do want to discuss, is Katniss asexual in my opinion upon rereading these books for the first time? I think that she's definitely on a spectrum of asexuality. She might lean a bit towards I don't know, maybe demisexual. So when you think about it, Katniss doesn't really have any like normal feelings that a straight girl would have. I don't know, because she never refers to anyone as being like beautiful or like attractive or hot or like any words that anyone would associate with someone being attractive in a romantic way. The only person that I can think of that she refers to being attractive is Finnick, and that's because she knows that like everybody finds him hot, especially in the Capitol, because obviously we learn later that President Snow has been selling Finnick's body. And while it's plainly obvious to me that she loves both Peeta and Gale, I'm not the most convinced that it's in any more capacity than as a friend. We do see throughout the series that a couple of times she'll talk about having this hunger when she's kissed both Gale and Peeta, where she feels this need to keep kissing them. But other than that, like, she never really expresses like wanting to be with anyone in a physical way. So that's kind of why I'm saying she's on a spectrum of asexuality, because she has expressed a couple of times having like an inkling of, like I said, that hunger, but other than that, she doesn't really talk about it. And also, Katniss as a mother is a very weird and interesting topic too, because in the epilogue, she's very clear about how it took like 15 years or something for Peeta to finally convince her to want to have kids, and Peeta wanted them so badly. And so part of me is like, does she have kids because she feels she owes him? Because so many times throughout the series, she plainly says, I will never stop owing Peeta. And so does she have kids just to please him? I mean, she does say that only the joy of holding her in my arms could tame it, like this feeling of being just so terrified of having kids. And then carrying him was a little easier, but not much. I'm not convinced that like she's the happiest person in the world to have kids, and I do feel like she did it out of some kind of obligation to Peeta, which just makes me sad because, you know, nobody should have kids just because they think they owe it to somebody or they owe it to their partner. We definitely get a feeling that she really loves Peeta. She for sure loves Peeta, but I'm just not convinced it's in the most romantic way. I still feel like she just feels a very deep friendship with him. I think I'm just gonna go with she's on a spectrum of asexuality, maybe leaning towards demisexuality. If you don't know what demisexual means, that's when you're only sexually or physically attracted to someone that you have a very deep emotional connection with. So I still definitely think that Catching Fire is my favorite book and movie, although upon this reread, I was very pleasantly surprised by Hunger Games. I thought it was an amazing first book of the series. I think she lays out the world so well. I just love how well it's paced. So like, these books are actually pretty neck and neck. With Mockingjay, I really enjoyed it. I still gave it 5 stars. I'm now seeing where other people are coming from though when they say that this is their least favorite of the series. And you know, a lot of people don't really like the pacing. I can see that as well. I think the pacing's a bit off, especially compared to these first 2 books. I think the direction of the story is a little odd at times too. She had to squeeze a whole civil war into 1 book. Yes, we get inklings of that rebellion and of that war in Catching Fire, but it's really in this book that we see everything go down. And so I think that's a huge commitment to try to do. So yeah, I'm a little conflicted about this book. It's not my favorite finale ever. I still think it's very well done. But yeah, it's definitely not my favorite book of the series. I can fully recognize that there's definitely issues going on with this book. So yeah, that's going to be it for all of my in-depth thoughts about the Hunger Games trilogy. I'm so glad that I reread this series, especially because I'm literally about to start The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes today. I am planning on doing a reading vlog dedicated to this, as well as a non-spoiler and then a spoiler-filled discussion, so definitely be on the lookout for that. I'm so pumped to see what this book is all about. So I would love it if you guys would leave comments down below if you want to discuss any of the points that I brought up in this video. I would also love it if you would consider pressing that like button and subscribing, and I thank you in advance if you do. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!